a way to write once, run on everything. So, whenever we come to start a project now, it's always, do we go native? Do we use a cross-platform framework? Okay, which one? React Native, Xamarin Forms. There's just too many now. But Flutter is a very new one to the scene, and I definitely think that this is the one that we might have all been waiting for, potentially. So, quick bit about me. I started off as a Android developer. I came into software development in Android, and that being my first development experience, I neither found it great, I neither hated it. It was kind of just a happy middle ground.
See Adrian, Java.
Before he knew any better.
Sorry, Paul. I then didn't get on with iOS's kind of magic. When I then came to try and start iOS development, I felt there was a bit of magic. I have my view and interface builder, and I'm dragging stuff from view to something like a header file, one of those things from Objective-C. And yeah, so I didn't really get on with that kind of magic, and also the language at the time. I did have a love Xamarin iOS because it was in a language that I liked. I felt there was less magic going on. You could argue there's more, but I was able to, reference a view I could create a view, give it an ID in Interface Builder, and reference it straight in my code. No draggy magic. Wait. I did then start to like iOS development after I got over the kind of magic-y bits, and then I started to dislike Android development. So, yeah. Not because of the language necessarily, but it just got all too fragmented. It's just got all too fragmented. Some things work on very specific different API levels, and it's quite confusing to keep up with which one. Google have their support library, which they've in the past few months now all changed and broken tons of Android apps. So yeah, it's just very fragmented, which is a bit of a pain. So my current platform processes, when I go to do iOS development, I don't really like using Objective-C. I don't mind Swift, but I prefer Xamarin iOS. Similar kind of thing with Android. I don't mind Java, believe it or not, Paul. Don't like Kotlin, but that could just be because I haven't got on board with it yet. But I prefer Xamarin. Again. Then in terms of code editors, IDEs, Android Studio, Xcode and Visual Studio are all ones that I'll have to use at some point, so I have to kind of get on board with them. I quite like using Visual Studio for Mac when doing Xamarin development, but my favourite is Visual Studio Code because it's more lightweight, very customisable. That's just my preferred one. So yeah, but quite easily, doing iOS and Android development, you can have two completely different developer experiences. You'll be in your headspace for one IDE and on language, and then all of a sudden have to switch for different IDE, different language. And then different ways of doing things, different ways Android and iOS work. When you kind of think, actually, they should work quite similar, it's a similar concept. But this is where Flutter comes in. Flutter definitely bridges the gap between where Android and iOS differ, and kind of make it so that the code that you're writing and all the concepts you're using are the same across both. So the reason Flutter is different from all of the other cross-platform frameworks is that the likes of React Native and Xamarin Forms, when you say, okay, I want to draw a button, it will then translate down to an iOS button and an Android button. But on Flutter, their abstraction is at the render engine level. So when you say, I want a certain kind of button, it appears identical on both. So this is an ongoing kind of argument between the design community as to whether there should be iOS designed apps and Android designed apps, or whether it should be one single brand experience.
I've never tried to push anything to the Apple App Store.
Sure.
Do they have an opinion on that? Will they penalise you for not using Apple flavour buttons?
No, they don't. They haven't yet. I touched on some apps that have been pushed out to the App Store recently, but yeah, there's tons out there. The Flutter team are very active, and they've said that if any don't get through Apple review for whatever reason, then they'll actively help to work out why and solve Apple's concern. But also you could have, for example, a button that was made the proper Apple way, that doesn't at all look like an iOS button. You could completely kind of tear it up, construct it out of different non-button components to make it act like a button. But that's then still using the way Apple want you to do it. So it's kind of, I guess it is down to their discretion, because they do have a control of what apps go into their app store. But it shouldn't be a massive concern. And I haven't heard, I checked through the GitHub issues quite regularly and haven't seen anything come up like that yet, which is good. Yeah, so the Flutter team sell Flutter as productively building apps using expressive UIs natively on 2 platforms at once. So I have just taken these straight from the Flutter website. But this app here is the same code running on both Android and iOS. They're not having to change anything. They're not having to. Do actually, if it's on iOS, make this button slightly bigger, or make this text font slightly bigger. They're just rendering exactly the same. This app here, Reflectly, is a showcase app that they take around whenever they go and do a talk. It's an app that's got an incredibly nice user experience and user interface. They call it a story journal, so it actively gets the user to perform different user interactions to kind of say how their day is going and that kind of stuff. And they actually originally were using React Native to make their app, but they found that they were having too many random UI issues with clipping and other stuff. So they decided to make the move from React Native to Flutter, and were able to do it without any hiccups and in a very short time constraint and with not many developer resources. There's also some business challenges when building apps. The first one is reach and retention. If you're going to make an app, do you do both platforms at once and get them widest reach? Or do you have the capacity to do that? Are your developers iOS developers? Are they Android developers? Are we now going to have to wait months to build both and release at the same time? We've also got high quality look and feel. Arguably the most important part of an app for smartphones is it's got to feel nice, it's got to look nice, it's got to look like something that you want to take your phone out of your pocket and use. Time to market. If you're a startup, you ideally need a product to market as soon as possible, so you can start generating a profit. And then also affordability. This is in terms of human resource. So it might be quite common practice to have a iOS developer and an Android developer. So that's now 2 developers you're employing. Whereas with Flutter, you're actually able to realistically only have 1 developer employed, and you're reaching both platforms. This then also shrinks the time to market, because for one, you don't need to build for one platform, wait, build on the next, and then release at the same time. You can just build for both at the same time and release at the same time. Same goes for reach and retention. And then the high quality look and feel. Flutter is very UI first. The Flutter team want it to be as easy as possible for you to make a really nice looking app, animations to be easy, and yeah, they're very user experience and user interface focused. So this was my old mobile development setup when I was doing Xamarin Native. So I'd have to use Visual Studio for Mac. I'd have my shared business logic layer, because that's the part that Xamarin Native lets you share. Platform-specific interactions such as integrating with the camera, NFC, and other bits and bobs. You would have to write your iOS and Android implementations unless you use plugins, but then you still have to make, show the data on the UI layer differently for both, because both iOS and Android UI layers work very differently. And because they work differently, they're not guaranteed to render in exactly the same way. But enter Flutter, and the way Flutter works, it uses a language called Dart, and it compiles down to machine code as well. So you are able to still have shared business logic, shared UI, platform-specific integrations. You still do need to write for your how do I interact with the iOS camera and Android camera. But you can do that with plugins, and the Flutter community and the Flutter team have made hundreds of plugins to already do all of this for you anyway, so we're actually finding that we're not having to write much platform-specific code at all. And because they use the same render engine, they are guaranteed to render in exactly the same way on Android and iOS. The render engine they use, it's called Skier. It's the render engine that Google Chrome uses or has used. And yeah, Skier is available on loads of different platforms, so that's why the Flutter team chose this as their render engine abstraction. But then also because the Flutter team have made Flutter so open, it's all open source, every part of it down to the engine and beyond. If you really wanted to, you could take out the Skier render engine level, replace it with another one if you really wanted. So it would take a lot of work, but they have the flexibility to do that. So yeah, I think that Flutter's changed the game because it's enabled me to have a nice developer experience. And by nice developer experience, I mean I get to use the tools that I want to use. I get to use the code editor I want to use. I get to use the technologies such as different analytics, push notification services. I can now choose the tools I want to use more so than I could before. There's no magic. If you want to see how something works, just dive into the source code and manipulate it if you want, but you can see absolutely everything that's going on. It's a fast developer experience because you are able to write for two platforms at the same time. It's more truly cross-platform, I feel, than other ones such as React Native, because it's the exact same code and there's no bridging. React Native, there's a JavaScript bridge to convert between JavaScript and platform-specific code, whereas Dart compiles down to machine code, so it's running right on the hardware as well. There's no extra layer there. It's time-saving. We felt that we were able to save around 30% of our time, even still whilst learning Flutter on the go and actually making apps, and then increase to around 40 to 50% after feeling comfortable with it. So we actually based this just on one platform. So for example, doing an iOS app the native iOS way was at time one, but we felt that doing an iOS app in Flutter, we were able to get time at 0.6, 0.5. It's also an easy developer experience. Flutter, like React Native, has hot reload, so there's no more stopping compiling and recompiling, waiting for it to kick in again. So what's it like to use? So yeah, Flutter uses a language called Dart, which is kind of fairly new. It's a fairly newish language, I think came out in 2011. But we felt that we kind of already knew it enough, so it's very much like Java, C#. So we already had familiarity, object-oriented. So yeah, we were very comfortable going in using it. There wasn't a massive learning curve. There aren't many quirks that we need to know about, which is good. It's ahead of time compiled, so yeah, it runs right on the hardware, which is good. I mentioned this a second ago. There's no bridging, so you are getting native performance, but then it's flexible enough to run in just in time to allow for a hot reload. Then there's also the stateful nature about it. So previously, you would actively be updating your individual UI elements. You'd be saying, okay, if I've got a label, I'm going to change the text to what it should be at the start. Now I'm going to change it to an error. Now I'm going to change it to a response. Whereas the stateful nature, you've got your label. This text part is a label. I'll come on to that in a bit, and it's just displaying your variable or your property or what have you. And then when you're changing this, the UI is updating for you, so you no longer need to worry about how's the UI looking at this current moment in time. You only need to worry about the state.
So is it model view controller?
Uh,
Or is it?
no, it's not. There's a quite common pattern that they're bringing in called block patterns, so business logic components. And this is the idea of using streams. So the user is inputting data or pressing buttons, and that's inputting data into a stream. And then your UI is also listening to stuff in the stream, and your business logic component just alters the data that's coming in for it to go onto the screen. I definitely haven't explained that very well, but yeah, they're kind of using a new pattern. That's definitely not in the scope of this introductory talk. Yeah, so it is very new, so where we're going to go if we got stuck, and luckily there is loads of documentation, so we can see every UI component that we can use, loads of code samples, etc. Stack Overflow, this is slightly old now, but still the same ratio, so there were 10,000 questions and only 2,500 of those were unanswered, so only 25% of questions haven't been answered really, so there's a good chance if you hit a bug, someone is going to have solved it before. Medium, the Flutter team and the community are very active on Medium, almost guaranteed. My first Medium email of the day will be a Flutter, the headline will be a Flutter Medium. The error logs are somewhat to be desired though, like this is an absolutely huge dump for something that it never even really told me what was going on. It was a case of going to Stack Overflow or GitHub to see if someone else had the issue. But they are getting better. This here is absolutely telling you exactly what's going wrong. It's telling me that my class it returned null. This is what it's thrown. That's the kind of level of bug reporting that we want. So yeah, the shared UI part of it. iOS uses UIKit. Progressive web apps on iOS use WebKit, but WebKit on iOS is really quite iffy. It's kind of almost like everyone else is in modern day, but Apple's back in 2014. Then Flutter uses, as I mentioned, Skia. And so does Android. Android uses UI views, and then Android. The WebKit stuff is Chrome's version of WebKit, and Google have already said that they're going to be going off on a tangent for their WebKit. It's going to be doing loads of stuff that isn't for the standard iOS. Most of the stuff that is today's standard is hidden away in experimental features on iOS. So that's kind of one reason why I looked into progressive web apps and kind of thought they're still going to be too different to make it worthwhile that bright ones run everywhere. With Flutter, because it's the same on both platforms, I'm no longer needing to know, okay, this is how a table view or collection view works, or list view or recycle view works. On Flutter, there is just one. I've listed a few UI elements here that, and they're iOS, Android, and then the Flutter equivalent. But it is a hell of a lot more flexible and a lot less complex to kind of work out how to do certain things. For example, making a list in iOS is an absolute pain. In Android, it's fairly easy. In the Flutter, it's like even easier, which is really good. So yeah, who's already using it? Quite a lot of people are, but I'm just kind of showing the people that Google are showcasing. So Abbey Road Studios, they made an app called Topline, which was a app for music artists to take on the go with them and make music on the go. When they originally made this, they did, I believe, iOS first natively, and then when it came to do the Android one, they chose to do it in Flutter. So later on, they were able to then decommission their old iOS app and just replace it with the new Flutter stuff. And it actually won a user experience award. I think it was like UX app of the year or something. It's a really cool app. Hamilton Musical, I don't know too much about this kind of industry, but this is one that they showcase, and it's quite big in the industry, which is cool that they showcase it. Lastly, the kind of arguably the biggest one, Google themselves use it. So the app I've shown there is Google Green Tea, which is an internal customer management app for Google employees, and then the Google Ads app is now made in Flutter as well. And Google Ads is one of Google's biggest revenue streams. So if the people that are bringing in the ads aren't happy with the way they're being able to do this, that'd be detrimental to Google. But they're actually using their own tools for their other tools, which I think is cool. There was also a big launch event when they launched Flutter 1. So when I say Flutter's new, version 1 came out in December. We're now at 1.2, but yeah, version 1 came out in December. So there was definitely an element of risk deciding to use it, but the Google team have said that it's been production ready since back in May, when it was still in, I think, only its second preview. But yeah, they did a big song and dance about the launch. So yeah, that's I got to go to it. I was in the second row. This is me with my lanyard. And then yeah, this was like an after party. So they're definitely proper trying to woo us, pulling us in with their canapes, fancy drinks. Couldn't pronounce half the stuff they were serving. It was all like blue for Flutter branding. So it was cool. But yeah, they're definitely trying to woo us. They're making a big deal about it. They're throwing a lot of money into it. Here they're live. They're doing a live like Q&A session. They do like weekly YouTube videos. I'm pretty sure they've got someone dedicated just to replying to GitHub issues. But yeah, so they're definitely trying to woo us. Google seem pretty confident in it, so therefore so should we. So yeah, we as a company I work for, we did use it in production. So I will demo this app quickly. So a bit of context, this app was for one of our clients, and it was a conference app. So they had a conference which was to last a week, yeah, so they wanted functionality such as QR code scanning, NFC tag scanning, and yeah, I'll show you the app. I've replaced the client logo with our logo, so where you see R1, just imagine there's a nice blue looking logo that actually fits into the app. So this is all completely written in Flutter. So that was the QR code scanning. Then yeah, there's a navigation drawer, which is definitely a very common UI feature today. But yeah, so what you're seeing here is something that was written in Flutter. You saw some really nice looking well, I thought they were nice looking animations, and Flutter makes it incredibly easy to do these kind of niceties, and yeah, blazingly fast as well. So yeah, the project constraints were they needed QR code and NFC tag scanning. So this part is now platform-specific integration, but we were able to find community plugins. So someone had already done all this stuff for us. They've just provided us with the Dart interfaces to be able to use them. So that's really easy. That saved us a lot of headaches. This isn't very good. I'm going to stand here. They also wanted push notifications and a nice user experience. So they wanted, nice animations. They wanted push notifications for user engagement. So yeah, they're kind of was definitely kind of throwing stuff at us that a typical mobile app should have. So we were hoping and praying that Flutter would have some of these, and luckily it did. And then we also only had 5 development weeks of time, so we did have to make sure that we were using the right tools for the job, because if we got 2 weeks in and realised, damn it, that's not going to work, kind of buggered really. Yeah.
Is it using Firebase behind push notifications, or is it using something else?
I do come on to that actually,
Okay.
so that's the next slide. So yeah, tools of choice, I did mention that, time's a bit tight, I did mention that Flutter is very open, so you can use loads of different tools. So for code editors, we can use Visual Studio Code, Android Studio, IntelliJ. I chose to use Visual Studio Code because that's my favourite. It's lightweight, it's familiar. Windows or Macs, so you can develop a Flutter app on Windows and Macs. The only caveat there is that you can't run an iOS app on Windows, which is something that I don't think Apple will ever let go. So at some point you will need a Mac to build your iOS app and test it. And I'm a Mac user, so I chose Macs. But
Can you build Linux as well?
I'm pretty sure it can. Yeah, I'm almost certain it can. Obviously you'll only be able to do Android apps, but yeah.
Do you know if they've talked of any ambition to target Linux and Windows desktop and Mac desktop?
There absolutely is. Flutter have a desktop embedder, which is literally does what it says. It runs Flutter apps as a native Mac, Linux, or Windows app. They haven't invested as much into it as mobile yet, but they've got the framework there, so you can do all of your UI stuff there. The only parts that you now can't do unless you write them yourself is the platform-specific integrations, because the Flutter team themselves haven't written much, and the community haven't written much either. So, for example, Flutter has Firebase plugins and camera plugins. They only work on Android and iOS. The Flutter team haven't written the Mac, Windows, and Linux implementations. That is something that you can do yourself, though, and it is fairly straightforward. So they are definitely headed in that direction. Web as well, but that's definitely very early preview.
If you're, let's say you're using IntelliJ and you want to target an Android app, can you import Java code?
Yes. So I'll show you what a Flutter project looks like in a sec. But yeah, so in IntelliJ and Android Studio, you've got your Dart code, and then you've also got your Java or Kotlin code there. So you can choose to use Java or Kotlin for Flutter. Same with iOS, you can choose to use Objective-C or Swift. But there seems to be a bit more support for Objective-C at the moment.
You mentioned web as well, potentially?
Yeah, so at the launch event back in December, they said that they call it Project Hummingbird, and that will be running, you write a Flutter app and that will run on Android, iOS as standard, and then you'll also be able to port it to the web like that. So it will be not quite sure how.
Is it WebAssembly?
Possibly, I'm not quite sure. They haven't given too many details about it yet. But when they demoed it, it was running like a native app was, just in Chrome. That's very early days. Cool. Oh yes, yeah. So the next decision was for analytics. Firebase or App Center. People used App Center before. App Center is Microsoft's kind of mobile solution tool. So it does continuous integration and deployment, push notification, analytics reporting, crash reporting. We quite like it, so we use that. And yeah, we chose to use App Center for analytics because we use it for continuous integration, deployment, etc. Then Firebase or OneSignal for push notifications. So we chose to use OneSignal, which I'm pretty sure wraps around Firebase anyway. But the client wanted to have control over the push notification management, and Firebase was definitely way more complex than what they needed, so we chose OneSignal for the client's benefit, not ours, as I'll come on to in a sec. Nearly finished, then I'll show you some hands-on stuff. So firstly, is that as reliable for a production as they say? Well, this is our App Center crash reporting, and there were no crashes. There was one up there which you can see was unsymbolicated. That was actually us. It's still in development on a simulator. This was not after it went into production, so there were no crashes in production. It was holding, what was that? Yeah, it's around 290 odd users a month, so it was getting some use out of it, which is good. Again, still no crashes. In terms of push notifications, this is just a screenshot from one push notification message, but over the week that the conference was being used, 2,000 push notifications were sent, and only 2 were undelivered, and that's because the person receiving it says no to push notifications. So clients will put that down to Flutter, which is good. Then that's just a screenshot of our fresh desk, help desk with no support tickets. Coming on to building though, that's a slightly different story. You can see quite a few fails there, and saying fixing app center build attempts about 5-6 times. This we can't put down to Flutter though, because it was in an iOS app. When you have push notifications, you then need another set of certificates, and in Xcode it knows that you need another set of certificates, so it asks you for them. App Center had a weird thing where it wasn't detecting that we were, so it wasn't asking us for them. We couldn't give it to them, and it was failing. Opened up support ticket, and they fixed it. Then it was fine. That was kind of round here when it started working again. But then OneSignal broke it because OneSignal updated their package version, so we then had to. When we did that, it broke. We had to drop down one. So OneSignal was actually a bit of a pain there, but it'll probably settle down. So yeah, that's there, just showing that there's OneSignal. Doesn't make us faster without us being lazy. So I mentioned we were saving time, but being faster, we don't want to get lazy. We don't want to fall out of best practices. And Flutter does have very good testing support, and it also generates LCOF reports for us as a screenshot of one. It doesn't, however, you can see here it says 16 lines. Admittedly this model doesn't have any functions, but even in a class it does have functions. LCOF just doesn't find the functions, but that's kind of minor. Okay, for comparison, at the top, I've got two family cars here. At the top we've got native, bottom we've got Flutter. So if we're doing native quickly, we're a boy racer. We're fast, we're dangerous. But we're two of them because we've got to do Android and iOS. If we're doing fast and proper, we're fast, but we're beastie. But there's two of us. On Flutter, on the other hand, if we're going fast and dangerous, we've got a fast but electric car, efficiency. I should have tested these on people before. But yeah, fast and efficient, but the fast is dangerous. But if we're doing it all properly, a bit more reliable, still efficient. That's okay.
I think you need to set your sights on cars a bit higher.
Yeah, I just typed in boy racer car, and that's what came up. So yeah, would we use it again? Absolutely, yes, we would use it again. And I'm going to show you why. So I've got on my on the description for
Tom, was it the conference app? Was it a one-off for that one conference?
It was, yeah, but
so it was relatively low risk in that respect.
Yeah, it was low risk there, so that's why I pushed. Okay, I want to use this. I think we should use this. So I did a couple of internal talks, kind of showing, this is how it works, and other people got on board. So that's why we then went to use it. Cool. Yeah. So in my description, I said that I would do a live 10-minute, see what we can make in 10 minutes. Just very quickly, I will just show you what a Flutter project looks like. So right now, I've done absolutely nothing. The only thing I have done is just made a new project. So I'm using the Flutter Visual Studio Code extension here, and there's a new project command. So you do that. It's activating. You give it a name, and it generates exactly what you can see here. I've done nothing else to this. So a couple of folders here. I've got an Android project, and this is where the Android part of Flutter sits in. iOS stuff, and then lib, which is where all of our Dart stuff lives. So Dart integrates with both Android and iOS, which is why you've got two native projects here. So I can right-click here and open Android Studio. If I was already using Android Studio or IntelliJ, I can just straight away have my Android stuff there, as well as my Dart. And actually, the extensions for Android Studio and IntelliJ also allow you to run on an iOS simulator straight from there, which is cool. Yeah, I like using Visual Studio Code. Yeah, so if there was a time where I did need to do some very platform-specific integration, I'd dive down into here. I can see my app delegate, so I can create extra classes here. I can do some other stuff here, but that's definitely beyond the scope of this. So yeah, I said I'd give myself 10 minutes. I would like to allow 12, so I can explain a couple of things on the way. But yeah, so
You've got 8.
I've got 8. Okay, well, I'll go as quickly as I can. I've got this default Flutter app running on an Android simulator here. The app we're going to aim for is the new looking Gmail. The old looking Gmail was a hell of a lot easier. So when I saw that they updated it, I thought, damn it, it's screwed over the talk. But yeah, okay, so I'm just going to start going. Stop me after.
You're right, Tom, just keep
okay.
going. Can you make
So-
it bigger?
Oh yeah, sure. Okay, let's start at 48. Is that better? So I can change.
I'm getting
Get
old,
rid
you
of
see.
Okay, bless you. So yeah, the default Flutter project gives you a ton of comments, which I don't really want. It is a bit of a faff. I feel like they should check, is this my first one? No, don't give them any comments. Or give them comments, then not. But yeah, so this is, with Flutter, you've got, there's some logic, there isn't separate view files and code files. It's kind of all a bit of one, but then there are ways you can abstract it into business logic components earlier, like I said, so your business logic is separate. But for the purposes of this, I'm not going to. But what you can see here, I've got this app bar, which is where it says Flutter demo homepage. I don't actually want that, so I'm going to get rid of that. As soon as I save it, it refreshes, which is good. See here, I've got a column which, as you'd probably expect, displays things on top of each other, which is good. Floating action button as well, well, that's this little thing down here which does something that we don't actually need to worry about for this. So I'm going to go ahead and start changing some things. Let's start with the floating action button. The colour is not right, it does have a background colour property, so I can then say I'm going to use a white colour. By default, Flutter includes loads of material colours for you from the Google Material Design Guidelines. It does also do Cupertino ones for iOS as well, but it's by default they just give you material. You can import it otherwise. Now I can't see our plus sign. Unfortunately, I don't think they have a multi-Google colour. So I'm just going to give the icon a colour of blue. So I guess I've kind of reverted to those colours there. Cool, so that's changed. I mentioned earlier that list views are a piece of cake to do in Flutter, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Firstly, you'll see here that all of my content is aligned to the centre of the screen. That's because on the column there's a property called main axis alignment, and it's giving it to the centre. So I can change it to start at the end, so all of my stuff is at the bottom. I can change it to be at the start, or I can just get rid of it because by default it's at the start. And I've got a couple of things here which I don't need, so I'm going to get rid of it. But yeah, so each view component pretty much has a child or children. So if it's a child, you can only have one of them. Children, you have multiple of them. So in this column, I want a list view. I do have to do something slightly different though, because it's in a column. I need to make sure that my list view can fill all the space of the column. Otherwise, there's some special random stuff that goes on in that the column doesn't know. So the list view doesn't know how much it's got to play with. So I make sure that I expand to the height of the column, and now I can create my list view. There's this method called listView.builder. And this essentially is just an efficient way of it only builds the view elements that are on the screen at the time. So you can see here that this build method takes a context and an integer. I won't bore you with what a context is right now, but it just needs it, and then it's also the position of the element. And it does need to return something, so I'm just going to return text for now. And look at that, I've already got an infinitely scrolling list, and in iOS that would take about half an hour to do. A slight exaggeration, but you wouldn't be able to do it that easily for sure. But when you take a look at these, you can see that things are aligned in a row. So I'm going to, like I've got a column view element, I can use a row, and a row also takes children. So if I save that, it's now Oh, this is where live demos don't work. I forgot about that. Oh, I'll keep going and stop and start it. Yeah, so in Flutter we've got modifiers and actual things that you can see. So for example, padding is a modifier because it pads the child with some padding. So there's loads of different types I can do. So I can just pad everything with 8 pixels. I'm going to hope that that starts up again. And each row has a kind of circly thing. This is something that I know about before, and I know it's called a circle avatar, and it just creates a circle and around something. There are other ways you could do this, but it just creates a circle essentially. Let's go with S for. Let's go with T for top man. Cool. So that should. Bloody live demos.
I want to give it a colour.
Oh, I just need to save it. Cool. So yeah, there we go. I've now got that looking a bit more snazzy. Cool. Okay. So next, I've now got columns again. I've got columns of text. I will wrap this in more padding, but I won't bother giving it anything yet. I'd also if I was doing this in production, I'd definitely componentize everything. It would not be in this massive tree, which I have seen get horrendous. But cool. So we've got some bits of text again. So yeah, this is from top down. Great, and then we've got 3 of those with different stuff. Thanks for order, and then that'll do. Cool. So if you remember earlier where there was the main axis alignment where I could control stuff on because it's a column, that's the main axis. We can also do the same for the cross axis, so on a column horizontally. So I can align all of my children to the start, and now they nudge back over where we want them. The text thing also has loads of different style things that we can give it. So such as the font weight. So, and then they give us loads of different values, but we just want to use the bold. That one's also bold as well. I won't bother with that. Yeah, so that's looking kind of okay. I'll just finish. I'll finish the row. Yeah, so in a row, I'm going to want to align something to the very end of the row, but I need to know this space beforehand, which means that I need an expanded widget initially, so it fills the space. Now I can use an align widget modifier so I can say that the children of this align widget are aligned to the very right, so center right. And this is another column. Sorry if I just assume stuff because I've practiced it. Yeah, so I've got more text in my column, and you can see here that it's gone all the way over to the right, but I could change this to the left, and it would be as far left as the available space, which is cool. Out of the box, Flutter also has icons, so you can just say I want an icon, and the icon that I want to use is a bordered star. There we go. Change the colour as well if you want. Yeah, so that's now changed slightly. And yeah, you've now got in like what 8 minutes, you've got a scrolling list view that's definitely at prototype level. You could, the designers worry about exactly how many pixels, but I'd then just put that into the different paddings, different font sizes, etc. But it's just incredibly easy, and this will run and look exactly the same on Android from only one set of code. Where it gets it from, it doesn't matter. Like any language, it's got the capability to make HTTP requests, so link into an API. It's the focus on Flutter is definitely the way to make beautiful looking apps in super fast times. Mostly this is not beautiful. I've done it in 8 minutes. But you can see that there isn't many steps that I need to take to get the list view looking just like this. And if I wasn't explaining things as I'd go along, I'd also do this bar up here as well. But yeah, I'll stop there. Gives time for questions. So yeah, any questions? Oh, yeah, Adrian.
So, is there a rich set of controls, things, obviously we get things like text boxes and data grids and stuff. Is that quite a rich set at the moment, or is it still quite limited?
It's incredibly rich. So on the Flutter, that'd be useful. If it loads, but yeah. So on the Flutter website, it lists all of their controls, and there is hundreds. So for example, the Google Material Design Guidelines. It's useful. It's its own website where it kind of says, oh yeah, this is how you should. It tells you how you should use them, but it doesn't give you them. Whereas Flutter, it does give you absolutely every material design component there is. So for example, out of the box, take navigation drawers. Out of the box, it gives you the ability to have one. Now straight away I can now drag them from the left, and in this drawer it takes a child, so I can start. I can give it. Oh, what could I give? I could give it anything. I could give it a drawer header and that. That's something for stuff. But yeah, it by default it chucks out kind of the scaffold. There we go. It's called a scaffold for kind of Google's Material Design Guidelines, but then also Apple's Cupertino one, and they've got a complete set of UI components for both.
And do you get stuff like two-way binder?
I haven't looked so much into, but also for example, if
like a form controller, for instance.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So on your text fields, I can't check the text field. On a text field, you have you can see there it's got a text editing controller, and you would create your controller, give this text field a controller, and your controller, when it receives updates, you can get it to. So I suppose it's not direct binding, no, but there are ways that you can.
Do notification change and stuff like that.
Yeah, the stuff like that. So yeah, it's definitely kind of more so callbacks, but it's not like JavaScript callback hell. It's kind of more managed and like that. So, yeah. So quick. So
Can I stop you there, Tom? It's getting close to 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
Have you wrapped for a few minutes to answer any other
Yeah,
questions?
sure. Yeah, of course.
All right, brilliant.
Cool.
Thanks, Tom.
Cool. Thank you.